Ready?
Good evening. Chris Lee and Joey Dwyer of Vandy Sports. Vanderbilt has just beaten Georgia Tech 35-27 in the Birmingham Bowl. Commodore fans had to wait a little longer than I think they hoped and anticipated, but it was all worth it. I think very good win for Vanderbilt. Joey, I guess the thing that stood out today, that late scoring flurry for the Commodores. I mean,
Mm.
it was crazy to set the stage. We had planned a trip to Colorado to see my aging in-laws. We go every year, either Christmas or Thanksgiving, and this was the year to go for Christmas. So we booked the trip back in August, having no idea that a bowl game was imminent and happening. And in fact, we took off as soon as the plane took off as soon as it kicked off. So I was watching a lot of it from an iPad. I get off the plane. It's a 1 point game from the time I set foot in the airport to the time I get my baggage. Vanderbilt scores 3 touchdowns with 2 turnovers in between. And then as soon as I get my bags, we get a rain delay. So it was just an odd way for me to experience it. But all that aside, what a win for Vanderbilt. They really, really needed this one.
Yeah, Clarkley a couple weeks ago said this was a legacy game for his team. I think he was right in a lot of senses. 7-6 looks a lot different from 6-7 and ending the season on a 4-game losing streak. Vanderbilt now cements his legacy as a winner, and it's the first time this program has won a bowl game since 2013. The first time that it's had a winning record since 2013. This team has defied all odds and at some points defied all reason and has found a way to do it. I think it was a pretty special end to a pretty special season. And Chris, that scoring flurry, I think was as dominant as Vanderbilt's been all year against a
Yeah.
Power 5 opponent. You saw the C.J. Taylor interception. You saw the fumble that was forced, I think, by Miles Capers. You saw Vanderbilt's offense really look as potent as it has in the last couple of weeks. Eli Stowers had a big day. Cole Spence got involved early. Diego Pavia, I think, was a big story as well. That was the best game he's played in certainly a couple weeks, and it might have been one of his better games of his Vanderbilt career. He was wheeling and dealing, and Chris, he added a new thing to his repertoire today, that block in the open
Oh
field
my
on the Quincy
goodness.
Skinner run.
Yeah.
I don't know if any other quarterback feels comfortable doing that, but Diego Pavia did it, and I think today just showed off how unique his skill set is again, and Vanderbilt's really lucky to have him for an extra year. You also saw some of the things that they've got to improve on in the portal. They got to get more talent on the perimeter. They might need another running back or at least a better line to block for their current running backs. Those things hampered them a little bit, but man, today's the day to celebrate Vanderbilt football. That's a good team they just beat, and they did it in a tough environment that probably had more Georgia Tech fans than Vandy fans. But Chris, really, really nice win for them and one that I think we'll be talking about for a while.
Yeah, let's thank a couple of people that have helped make this happen. Basketball season presented by the Wash House. If you're dreading laundry day, if it steals the time to do the things that you truly enjoy, let the laundry professionals at the Wash House take care of that for you with 2 convenient locations in the greater Nashville area. Just drop off your dirty laundry to my buddy Steve Andrews. He and his professional attendants can give you back the one thing you can never have enough of. That's your time. Great dude, big Vanderbilt fan, so very happy tonight, I'm sure, about the outcome of this one. Anyway, within 24 hours, pick up your freshly folded, clean laundry ready to be put away. WashHouseClean.com is where to go. Stop in today, get your time back. Tell Stephen Andrews, thank you for your support of what we do here. Baseball season presented by the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company, a family-owned third-generation milk and ice cream distribution company located in Murfreesboro. Its partnership began 50 years ago with Purity Dairy in Nashville to provide purity milk and ice cream to consumers in Middle Tennessee. Now they serve Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama, Chattanooga, North Georgia. They also supply grocery stores, convenience stores, and others with Purity products, as well as Mayfield, Nestle, Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Who doesn't love ice cream? Celebrate the win tonight with some ice cream. Get your Purity. Thank the folks at the Murfreesboro Pure Milk Company for getting it to you and for their sponsorship of the show. Never had a football sponsor this year. Hopefully we'll have one next year. A little more excitement, I think, heading into next season than this one. But really, Joey, the key, other than the Alabama game, that's the biggest game they had all year. That set the stage for a lot of what is possible with this season and maybe some seasons to come. But just to recap, Eli Stowers gets a 3-yard touchdown pass from Diego Pavia. The game is 14-13 before that play. That puts Vanderbilt up 8 points at that point. I'm thinking, okay, if they can just kind of play ball control and make a big play somewhere, they got a pretty good shot here. Well, that came on the C.J. Taylor pick. I think that's what happened next. Skinner holds in a 7-yard touchdown from Diego Pavia, which frankly was a beautiful throw. He put it within 3 inches of where it needed to be. Skinner made a really tough play on the sideline. That ball was only thrown where he was going to get it. And then the fumble, I think it was Miles Capers that forced it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Capers was the one, by the way, that forced the one against Alabama, was he not?
He was, yes.
Yeah, so probably the 2 biggest forced fumbles of the year by Miles Capers. Vanderbilt takes that, turns it around, scores on a Diego Pavia touchdown run. At that point, Vanderbilt's up 35-13. There's 9:59 to play. Not long after that, we go into a long rain and lightning delay. But that was right there. That was less than 6 minutes of game time. 3 touchdowns, 2 picks, and that was the ball game right there. You look at the stat sheet later. Georgia Tech won the stat sheet for the most part until you look at the turnovers. 2-0. Once again, the 0 was something that they did all year when they won games. They didn't turn it over, but that was where the ball game was decided. Basically, from that point on, Tech was going to need a miracle to win this one, and that miracle went away when the kickoff after the second touchdown with 1:30 left went out of bounds.
Yeah, Chris, I thought it was huge that Vanderbilt didn't turn it over today, and also maybe even bigger than that was when Georgia Tech turned it over, Vanderbilt cashed in. They had that really nice pass to Quincy Skinner in the end zone. That was one of the better throws I've seen Pavia make, and just felt like they were up for the moment when those types of things happened today. Chris, it felt like they were under control. And I think one of the big stories today is Diego Pavia's health. This was the first time, I think, in a long time that he was fully healthy, and, man, it showed. He obviously threw the block, and then Georgia Tech had this one series where they blitzed 6 guys, 2 out of the 3 plays, and Vanderbilt went 3 and out. But the play that Vanderbilt actually gained yards on was Pavia dodging guys in the backfield and finding Cedric Alexander across the field. That hadn't happened in a long time. Diego Pavia was everything you could have imagined today and more, and that's what Vanderbilt needed to win a game like this. And the scoreboard kind of lies to you a little bit. I think Vanderbilt won that game more decisively than the scoreboard indicates. Obviously, that garbage time timeout or the garbage time touchdown, that was a huge way to win that game, though, and Diego Pavia was a big factor in how they did it, Chris. His health, though, one of the main stories of the day, and when they get him healthy to start next year again, watch out.
That's kind of what we all wondered, right? Was the end of the season, they just ran out of gas because of health, or was it because other teams figured them out? And to some extent, I'm sure teams caught on a little bit to what they did. You saw a little bit more imagination with the offense today, with some end arounds and some things like that. So, but I thought, as soon as I saw the matchup for this, it was like, oh man, I didn't think they didn't have a chance to win, because I did, but I thought, maybe the best thing for them to happen, and I know they don't think like this, was to, get knocked out of the pecking order. When Oklahoma beat Alabama, that sort of threw a wrench into things. And play a team that they could overmatch athletically. I thought the last thing they needed was to play a team that sees the kind of stuff they run in practice, that's really physical in the trenches. I mean, that's Georgia Tech to a T. If you guys didn't see Georgia Tech play this year, go back and watch some of their games. And they beat Miami, were the first ones to beat Miami this year, and gave Georgia everything Georgia wanted. In a game where Georgia had a lot to play for. That game went to, I don't even know how many overtimes. And, if it weren't for a questionable call here and there, Georgia Tech comes out of Athens a winner. And when I saw that matchup, I just thought that's not the break they needed. Mm-hmm. For me, for them to win that game against Georgia Tech just makes what they did this season all the more special, because there was no layup in the bowl game. It wasn't one of these things where they matched up well. A team had a ton of opt-outs. Now, Tech had some, but you saw a lot of teams across the country lost a lot more than Tech did. To me, that was really a stamp of validation on the season that this team had.
For sure. And I think just getting a win in general does it, but especially in that way with 2 programs that are in similar spots. I think Georgia Tech might even be a year ahead of Vanderbilt in some ways. Vanderbilt goes and beats them, and it's not like that system was completely exotic to Georgia Tech. first of all, it kind of knew what was going on, right? It's seen stuff
Yeah.
like that before, but also they had a month to prepare for it, and Vanderbilt still came out. And I think that tells you something about Tim Beck and Jerry Kill too. They were innovative enough to be able to scheme their way into a win there. And I think a lot of it was guys winning one-on-ones too, and that was a lot of our questions throughout the year. Can Quincy Skinner win a one-on-one on the perimeter consistently enough? Can Junior Sherrill do it? Can Eli Stowers get involved when he's one-on-one rather than just being doubled the whole game? And Eli Stowers had that and one catch down the field.
Yeah.
Quincy Skinner caught that touchdown. Junior Sherrill made a nice catch, although there were a couple that I thought he could have caught or got more separation on that he didn't. But, man, I was pretty impressed by a lot of Vanderbilt's playmakers. I still think they need a few more, but Cole Spence stepped up today. Eli Stowers stepped up today, and that's what Vanderbilt really needed. It needed its scheme to be a little bit more developed than it was in the last couple of weeks and work a little bit more. But it also needed guys to win one-on-one matchups, and that happened on both sides of the field. There was a lot of second and third team guys out there on defense for a lot of this game, and none of those guys truly got exposed, and that was a big thing too. Chris, I thought an interesting stat today. Nick Rinaldi had 2 sacks. Nick Rinaldi now ends the season as Vanderbilt's sack leader. So, again, just a testament to kind of how they're able to use their guys. Nick Rinaldi was a guy we came into the season, and we're kind of thinking, man, where's the role for Nick Rinaldi? And he ends up as their sack leader. So they know how to use their personnel, and when their personnel is in a spot where they're one-on-one, more than often today they won it.
Yeah, I was going to shout out Rinaldi because, like, that's a spot where it didn't feel like between Patterson and Longwell, who were on the field most of the time this year. And I didn't catch which one he was spelling today. I meant to check that. Those were 2 pretty big sacks for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one guy. And I was going to say, you kind of touched on this, the tight end room for them was huge today. I think that people came out of camp when Cole Spence went most of the season and barely touched the ball, probably thinking we were nuts. You saw a little bit today of what we saw in camp, the first touchdown. So you had just little guys, Pavia obviously is going to be the headliner today because of 5 combined touchdowns. And we'll talk about him a little bit more in a minute, but it was other guys. Luke Fungi had a big catch for 40 yards earlier in the game. Jesse Mirko hit a punt that, Vanderbilt was the beneficiary of a very questionable penalty on that one.
Right.
That was about a 40 yards of field position penalty, but that was a big play. You had a lot of guys, Rinaldi, the tight ends, just really stepping up, and the Stowers catch too was a huge one because that was a premium catch that, like, one day when we're watching him get drafted one day, that's going to be one of the ones you're seeing on NFL Network.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think Eli Stowers really showed some things today. I didn't think he necessarily struggled over the last couple of weeks, but he wasn't the factor that he was early in the season for a lot of the time because of kind of how he was guarded. And even though he was guarded pretty heavily today too, I thought he was excellent. And I also think Cam Johnson needs a shout out. He had a huge pancake on the perimeter where it allowed Diego Pavia to get 5 to 6 extra yards. So everybody kind of stepped up there. And I think it's also worth noting today was the last game for a lot of Vanderbilt guys, including CJ Taylor. And what a fitting way for CJ Taylor to go than strumming on the turnover guitar with a couple minutes left in a game where it's mostly Vanderbilt fans in the stands. I think those guys, after all they went through for this program, deserved something like that. And just giving them that today and letting them go out as winners in a season that was defined by winning and turning things around, I think that's a special way for guys like CJ Taylor and Derrick Wright to go as well, Chris.
Yeah. I noticed when they did the Gatorade bath at the end of the game, the guys that were around Clark Lee congratulated. One of them was Taco Wright. Didn't ever really play much on his way out. I can't remember who else had the Gatorade. It was somebody who didn't play a lot. The opt-outs, there really weren't any opt-outs. You had one kid who hit the portal who would have really helped him today, Gunnar Hansen. But I think that the way Clark Lee held this team together and kept buy-in in a time where it's hard to do it start to finish of a season, period. It's really hard to do it in a bowl game. Even you see some of these games, like a Cotton Bowl or something like that, where a team that thought it was going to be in the playoffs but wasn't. A bunch of guys opt out. This game meant a lot to those guys today, and you could tell by the way they played, and you could even tell by the body language of the guys that really didn't have a hand in this one and had no reason to really feel like part of it in a way today in terms of contributing. And I just thought that told the story of a lot of what made this season possible.
For sure. I think Clark Lee got a lot of crap in the past for not being a good enough motivator, being just like a professor on the sideline. This season, I think you kind of saw a glimpse into why maybe that's not the full story. I think Clark Lee did a tremendous coaching job with this team. And more so than anything, kind of surrendering over his power of the offense to some guys who probably knew more than he did at that point, to be frank. I think there's a big testament to what Clark Lee did this year. He was probably the reason for this turnaround. And just kind of today was another testament to what he's built. Even Jeffrey Hugo, a guy who played a ton today, is in the transfer portal currently. I think he's heading to Coastal Carolina, the rumors are saying. So even a guy like that comes in and is bought in and gives it one last ride and plays a lot in Rand Fontenette's absence. That's another testament to what they did. Clark Lee, I think, has really proved himself as a motivator this year in some senses. And I think that's almost an invalid argument at this point that he's not.
The bookends that I'm about to give here, some of this happened a long time before, you even thought about doing this, but it's kind of interesting. And I'm thinking back, like rain delays. Every time you think of a rain delay involving Vanderbilt, everybody goes back to that 2014 Temple game, which is the first game they played under Derrick Mason. And it was the last game after James Franklin won Vanderbilt's last bowl game, which was in Birmingham. I remember being down there and just seeing how fired up the fan base was and how good they were that day. They ended up finishing in the top 25. And really, Joey, since then, that's been one of the last things that the fan base has had to cheer about. I mean, I shouldn't say that. There were some wins over Tennessee. That's always special. I don't care if Tennessee's good, bad, or mediocre. Anytime you're Vanderbilt, you beat Tennessee, that's a special win. But you looked up at the end of the year, they're still going 6-7. And when you can't finish that off with a winning season, I feel like it loses some of the luster, which is kind of interesting. The last time they finished a winning season was in Birmingham. And I'm sure for a minute when the delay happened, everybody's thinking, oh, boy, here we go again. Especially when Tech got 2 touchdowns and was within an onside kick of being able to tie it with a touchdown on it, too. But that was kind of running through my head as the clock ran down.
Yeah, I think this team has defied a lot of odds, not only in terms of numbers, but in terms of feel. Today was another example of that, too. They go and beat a team that, in all probability, they probably normally don't beat in its program history. And I think this game, I wasn't around for the 2013 Birmingham Bowl. You probably feel better about where they're headed in the future than you did then. Yeah. With Franklin leaving, I think you feel really good about where they're going into the offseason. They've missed on some guys in the portal, sure, but last year they missed on a lot of guys too. And now you're going into the winter and you're going into the spring with your quarterback back. I think Eli Stowers has a real argument to stay. There's a lot going for this program right now, and this, I think, springs its momentum to a different level. That's something that you can hang your hat on, and it's a big difference between being 7-6, ending on a win, and being 6-7 and losing 4 straight. Chris, that's a huge thing. Perception is often reality in these cases, for better or for worse. And the perception is going Vanderbilt's way right now, especially in the midst of what they did today.
Remind me to circle back to perception and reality in a minute, because I think that might be a good way to close. And kind of with that last Birmingham Bowl win is your backdrop, because I think there's some interesting things there to unpack. But Diego Pavia today looked, like you said, healthier than he's looked in a long time. Accounts for 5 touchdowns, runs for 85, throws for like $165, was bigger than the numbers, avoided some sacks today, did get caught with that grounding penalty. That really wasn't his fault. The Tech just sent the house several times. I thought his ability to spin out of traffic and throw the ball out of bounds or even hit a receiver now and then was huge. It looked like the old Diego Pavia, where there was at least a threat there that he could pull it down and go between. I remember he converted maybe big 3rd and 8 that looked kind of like a lot of those plays that he made to keep that Alabama game. I'm not going to say keep alive. That's the wrong choice of words, because they led the whole time. But it looked more today like vintage Diego Pavia. And then when he's sprinting down the field, and throwing blocks at the end of a rush, that was like that might have been the highlight of the day when he threw that block at the end of that play in some ways.
For sure. I'm going to read you a stat, Chris. Diego Pavia's 28 total touchdowns are the most for a Vanderbilt quarterback since Kyle Shermer's 29 in 2017.
Goodness.
And then his rushing touchdowns, I think he ended the year with 8. I don't even know the last time that a Vanderbilt quarterback has had 8. I think Patton Robinette had something along those lines. In 2013, I think he had 7. There must have been something before that. I think it was 2006 was the last time a guy had 8 or more, and I think that was 9. So a long, long time ago for the touchdown numbers for Diego Pavia. I don't think his passing numbers are going to blow you away, but it's so much bigger than numbers with him, and it was today. Diego Pavia, obviously the block was huge, but the way he evaded sacks, like you said, and another play that stands out to me too, kind of off topic, he runs for that 4-yard gain out of bounds, slips the ball to the Georgia Tech fan, gets the 15-yard penalty. What does he do the next play, Chris? He runs for 15 yards. That's the Diego Pavia experience. You think, man, what is he doing? He's going to get him in trouble at some point with this. And he just doesn't. He's also the first quarterback in the Clark-Lee era that's played every game. And I think that's something worth noting as well, even though he's been banged up, even though a lot of other quarterbacks wouldn't have gone in those games. Diego Pavia went. And I think Vanderbilt is better off than it has been in a long time at the quarterback position. Them getting him back is just massive. And we've talked about that before, but having this not be his last game is such a huge thing.
Yeah, it was funny today. There were some, oh boy, you really shouldn't have done that moments that piled up there. That was one of them where they're about to drive in for the knockout punch. He gets that personal foul penalty. You're going, oh boy. If they lose that, you look back and that might be a pivotal moment. That was something that, like you said, he makes up for it. And then you have that sequence into the first half. Because honestly, to me, the middle 8 was not great for them today.
No.
Yeah, I mean, they had 3 straight penalties. I mean, goodness, Colby Taylor gets a penalty. And then before the next snap, gets yanked out of the game, gets a personal foul penalty from the sideline. You don't get that penalty there. Tech probably doesn't kick a field goal. It's 14-10 at half. And then, second half Tech comes down and is kind of controlling the line of scrimmage. Kicks the field goal, gets to within a point. Vanderbilt answered from there. But those were 2 moments today where the game was kind of in the balance, partly through their own lack of discipline, but they managed the first time they end up holding Tech to a field goal. And I'm trying to remember, was that one of the Rinaldi sacks?
I believe so.
Yeah, and I think Langston Patterson had a big play. That might have been the sequence of that one, or that could have been the one to start the second half. But anyway, point I'm making here, I don't remember exactly the sequence, but they had a couple of times where they really shot themselves in the foot. Tech was right there in a spot to capitalize, and they answered pretty quickly. Now, that ended up being big, too. It wasn't just that flurry, but I think, they give up a touchdown before the half. That game probably feels a lot differently going into the second half than it did.
Yeah, Chris, a lot of what we talked about last year and why that team didn't succeed, because I think it was a pretty talented group, maybe not as talented as this one, but a lot of the reason they didn't succeed was because of the here we go again, lack of mental fortitude aspect of that team. This team has not had that all season. I think they've overcome the big moments to where they've been up against it. And they did that again today. You mentioned the Colby Taylor penalties. I thought those were going to be big. They weren't. The Diego Pavia thing we mentioned earlier where he got the 15-yard penalty, immediately got it back. It's a resilient group. And I think a lot of the reason that this team was successful and a lot of what this team will be looked back upon as is a team that was resilient and a team that didn't allow outside perception to get to it. It didn't allow things going wrong on the field to get to it. It didn't allow injuries to get to it. It just kept pushing and it kept winning. And I think a lot of teams, after losing 3 straight to end the year and going to a bowl game after a couple of transfers, I think a lot of teams would quit in that scenario. Vanderbilt didn't. And I thought that was a huge reason that it won today. A lot of bowl games this time of college athletics are who wants it more, because a lot of teams don't want it at all. Today was a good example of why bowl games can still be effective and bowl games can still be a good thing for the sport. Both teams wanted it today. Both teams took pride in it. They both wanted the cowbell, and they both wanted to cement a legacy, and I thought Vanderbilt really did that today, even more so than Georgia Tech. This team will now be looked at as a winner, like we said earlier, rather than a team that was awesome and then had a skid to end the year. Nobody's going to remember that 3-game skid now. They're going to remember what they did today. Yeah. They're going to remember what they did against Alabama and Auburn and Kentucky and Virginia Tech. This team has defied the odds time and time again, and it wasn't as big of a spread today, and there wasn't as much resilience required, but they did it again, and I thought that was a real testament to their ability to kind of weather the storm, and also Clark Lee's ability to keep the group engaged.
Yeah, what a weird day on the tackle sheet. By the way, I don't think Taylor, I'm looking on the board, I don't remember seeing him in the second half. Was he out there at all?
Not that I remember.
So I think those reps went to Jalen Lackey, didn't they?
They did a lot of rotating in the secondary today, especially early. You saw a lot of guys out there, especially Dante Carter, too, got on the field a good bit and wasn't a liability. I think he can be a guy that takes a step forward this offseason.
Well, looking at ESPN's box score, their leader in tackles today was Rinaldi. 10 total stops, 8 solo, 2 sacks. And then number 3 was Maurice Hampton, who had 7 tackles and 4 solos. What a weird way to end the season with those guys, your number 1 and your number 3 tacklers.
But it's also fitting in a way, too, because they've had so many guys step up into roles that we didn't necessarily think they could do. And that was a big thing throughout the course of the year. They had a lot of depth show up on the defensive line. They had some depth show up in the secondary. Jalen Lackey, I thought, was a big positive coming out of the year. And I thought Maurice Hampton, as the year went on, got better, too. So another emerging theme from this group is they have started to build up depth, and Clark Lee's talked about it for years, and it's never really come to fruition. I think today was a good example of this being one of the first years that you've actually seen it and been like, wow, they're actually recruiting layers worth of guys, and it's working. Chris, that was a big thing today, I thought, and I thought a big catalyst for their success on the season.
Yeah, shout out to the offensive line today, too. I didn't think it was dominant, but I thought that was the best game it had played in a while. Now, pass blocking was an adventure. And some of that may have been Texan and more guys than Vanderbilt had available to block. But I thought the run game, and there was that one play, what was it, the fourth quarter? I think it was Alexander, disappears in a cloud of people. Next thing you know, you've got offensive linemen, all of them just kind of pushing the pile another 8 yards or so. To me, that was one of the defining moments of today. It's like, okay, we haven't seen the line have moments like that in a long time.
And I also don't think they missed Gunnar Hansen as much as a lot of people thought they would have missed him. Obviously, entered the portal a couple of weeks ago. Stephen Hubbard really slid in well at left tackle. I'd have to watch and see the PFF grades and everything, but I didn't notice a huge difference in terms of where Gunnar Hansen was versus where he wasn't today. I thought it was a good next man up type thing there. And I think their offensive line is really well coached. Chris Konakis deserves a lot of credit even today. I think Georgia Tech's defensive line was a lot better than Vanderbilt's offensive line in terms of pure talent. Vanderbilt found a way to hold them off, though, and I thought that was a big thing. I think Georgia Tech did do a lot of blitzing, and that threw Vanderbilt off early in the second half. They sent 6 several times. There's 2 or 3 drives early in the half where I thought they really threw Vanderbilt off, but Vanderbilt adjusted and obviously blew the game open. And I actually have the presser on my computer right now, Chris. CJ Taylor and Diego Pavia are talking. I think Taylor was a guy who made a real impact today, too. It came down and made that big hit in the third quarter right before the rain delay, and then also the interception again. Very fitting that CJ Taylor ends his career strumming the turnover guitar and wearing a hat, commemorating a bowl win. Again, a lot of guys like him have come in this program, and a lot of guys have left this program without something to show for it. And I think the guys who stayed through all of Clark Lee's early tenure and a lot of the Derrick Mason, or I guess not much Derrick Mason, but were recruited by the Mason staff, believed in Clark Lee and stayed. Those guys were rewarded today. And I thought that's a story as well that needs to be told, not just the influx of transfers and how they've transformed this thing. Clark Lee could not have done this without CJ Taylor and Derrick Wright and guys like that staying, and especially guys like Taka Wright who were on the field a ton but still believe in their vision. Those guys are now rewarded and get to celebrate, and that's what makes college football so great, Chris.
Yeah, well, and good for CJ. He could have left, I think, for greener pastures at other times, had probably the biggest defensive play of the game for them today. So that was just another – I mean, this was – really, if you want to summarize today, Joey, I think it was this. When Vanderbilt really, really needed a big play, it generally got one. Whether that was offense, defense, and not as much special teams today, which was a little bit of a surprise. But, I mean, you had the Mirko punt that got down at the 2. They almost ended up getting a safety out of that.
Mm-hmm.
That was – I thought if you want to sum it up into one storyline in a couple of sentences, I thought it was that. It was that and Pavia just being the Pavia that we got used to seeing first half of the season.
For sure. And I think today, even more than all that, is about the legacy that this group has left. Like we've talked about ad nauseum, it would be a lot different if they had lost this game. And them deciding that they were going to take pride in this game and show up despite the guys who had left, despite some of the guys on the trip being in the portal, some of the guys on the field being in the portal, despite not having Brandon Fontenette, them coming out and finding a way to win this game, not only win it, but do it somewhat decisively, I thought was a big testament to how this team should be viewed. I think this team should be viewed among the great Vandy teams, which obviously not a super high bar to set with the program's history, but this team changed a lot for this program, and now we're talking about games like Georgia Tech is games that they should be winning in upcoming years, whereas heading into the year we were talking about, man, could they maybe sneak a game by Virginia Tech, a team like that? Now the standard is now raised because of this group, and Stephen Hubbard a couple weeks ago told us that he thought his transfer class should be remembered as GOATs, and I don't know that they'll be remembered quite that way, but they should certainly be remembered as catalysts for change in this program, and the program certainly needed change, and it got it.
Yeah. I want to hit on that in a minute. By the way, if you got a question or anything, drop those in the comments. We may hit a couple of those on our way out here in a few minutes. But chat sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm, longest-running sponsor of Vandy Sports. If your loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Guest line presented by John Levin, good friend of the show. Wobble Bond Dickinson thanks the student-athletes at Vanderbilt University for their dedication, effort, and hard work. Guest line presented by Yeaman Packaging Systems, leaders in end-of-the-line packaging automation. I lost my train of thought. What did we talk about just before we went to the reads there?
We were talking about legacy and things along those lines.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to see Pavia's TV interview after the game?
I did not, actually.
There was definitely a realization of what it meant to the program, which I thought like that really showed an awareness on his part. I mean, in this day of guys just kind of coming in and getting their check and cashing out and going on to the next stop, it felt like the gravity of what they did kind of set in. And I'm sure Diego could have gone somewhere next year and gotten paid too. I mean, still could, I guess, technically, but
he actually just confirmed about 2 minutes ago that he's back for 25 as long as the coaching staff is fully intact.
Yeah, I mean, he'd already kind of done that, hadn't he?
But he had, but he just said it in the presser, which I guess is noteworthy.
Yeah. So, yeah, I thought that was it true? Did his family get kicked out of the game?
I cannot confirm that, but I don't know that I'd be shocked to hear that.
I think I'm here for another year. The traveling Pavia Road Show. That was something to watch this year.
I mean, what an unbelievable story, right? I don't know that we could have anything better dropped in our lap.
Well, I mean, that was really exactly what the program needed because everybody went out last year just thinking this felt kind of hopeless, which it had started to feel that way. I mean, do you remember before the season, Paul Feinbaum went on his show, and I think they brought up the fact like his Vanderbilt won its last game, against a Power 5 team or last SEC game, like because you've got all this changing landscape of conference affiliation and TV dictating this or that. I thought, that was kind of like somebody saying the quiet part out loud. And boy, how much has it flipped since then? And like, if Diego Pavia, Jerry Kill, Tim Beck, those guys never come, I don't know what this season looks like, but it doesn't look anything like that.
Yeah. We got a question a second ago. I don't know if Billy can pull it up, but it was about where do they go from here? I think they go and try to build on what they've got because I think they certainly have a lot to build on. You could get Diego Pavia back. You probably will. You might get Eli Stowers back. You should get a good bit of that roster back, and I think that's something worth noting as well. But man, they've really reworked their offensive line to this point in the portal. They probably still need a few more, but I think they've got some difference makers there. I don't think they're as far off from being better next year as maybe some people think they are at this current moment. I think they only need a little bit to supplement it. They've got to get some depth, but their playmakers are maybe in place if Stowers comes back. And I think the guys they've got in the portal so far, none of them are world beaters. I think Jordan White from Liberty is a really good player. But, man, there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Vanderbilt fan right now, regardless of what they do in the portal. You have Diego Pavia back next year, and as Clark Lee said a long time ago, when Diego Pavia's on the field, you got a chance, Chris.
Well, look, I mean, you say some of these transfers may not be world beaters. They did get some impact guys for sure. Like last year, I think Corday Sidner ended up being a better find than I think any of us knew. By the way, I thought he played pretty well at times today too. Zaylen Wood, it's been so long since he's played, but when he played those few games, he was among the best defenders they had. Two guys they got in the portal. Nobody had any idea Stowers was going to be that good. I think we knew what it could look like with Pavia, but there was the question going in, like, can he replicate this against Power 5 teams week in and week out? And, like, when we saw it in the fall, I think we had a lot of questions. I mean, it did not look like a guy that was going to go light the world on fire. Now, look, they were messing around with combinations and this and that, and he's clearly one of the guys that, like, when the lights come on, it looks a lot better. But I remember there were times in camp where, like, I don't think this guy's got the arm strength. Like, I remember particularly, like, one play, I think they were doing a Hail Mary scenario late in the scrimmage, and he had a clean throw. I'm not sure it went 40 yards. And do you remember the play I'm talking about?
Vaguely. I do remember the second scrimmage and just how abysmal they looked that day. That looked like they were going to win two games again.
They were so bad that day. But he's one of these kids that it just – I think the personality and the belief transcends everything. And I think when he's out there – and here's the thing. I think I can count on one hand the bad balls he threw this year. Like one of the picks in – like one of the picks in the Tennessee game was – I think had been tipped and a guy caught on his back. Like, he didn't throw that I remember today. He didn't throw anything that was anywhere near being picked. And he threw some balls on a dime. Like the one to Stowers, the one to Skinner. Like, he was back to that thing like when it was really clicking for them this year. Like, he's making throws that are, probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10 on a degree of difficulty, and he's putting him like within a 6-inch radius of wherever the ball needed to be. And that guy, can win a lot of games in this league. And even, I know another thing I was going to. You mentioned Kyle Shermer earlier. Shermer had a lot more talent around him than Diego had this year. I mean, that team had Trent Sherfield, who's still playing in the NFL. It had Jared Pinkney, who was a pretty good college tight end. They had Corey Blasingame, I think, was in their backfield who played, I think may still be playing in the NFL. They had a couple of linemen, I think, that played NFL snaps. Like, I don't know that they've got any NFL linemen on this team. Stowers, I think, is an NFL tight end. I don't know if they got an NFL receiver. I don't know that they've got an NFL running back. That was the best quarterback year anybody's had at Vanderbilt, certainly since Jay Cutler was Player of the Year in 2005.
Yeah, I think they certainly have a chance to add some offensive skill players, too, under him. Guys want to play with him. And the portal's only been open a couple of days since the ruling, I guess. Hudson from New Mexico State, his second receivers at Vanderbilt now. I actually talked to him a couple of days ago, and that'll be up at some point. But, man, guys want to play with Diego Pavia. Guys are drawn to that. I think the system maybe presents some challenges to recruiting receivers, but the guys are going to want to play with him, and I think they're really going to have a pitched offensive lineman, assuming they invest in that. The offense, I think, could even be significantly better next year, and that's an interesting thought to have right now.
Yeah.
But you're getting Junior Sherrill back, probably getting Cedric Alexander back, you're probably getting A.J. Newberry back, and then you've got a lot to work with Diego Pavia, and Eli Stowers is the big question mark right now. But if you've got those two back with Alexander and Sherrill, you've got a real chance, Chris, and let's see what they can add to it. But I certainly think they could be better. If you're replacing Skinner and Fungi with guys who are legitimate difference makers on the outside, not that Skinner wasn't, you've got a real chance to take a step forward offensively.
All right, we got a memo from Billy. Said we're going to have to wrap it up soon. He's doing this remotely, and his laptop is about to die. But a couple things. Here's another thing I want to mention, and people kind of forget this. We've talked about it on the podcast from time to time, but there were some guys today that could have helped them today. Fontenette was one of them for sure. In my opinion, was their best defensive player this year. What happened there? I didn't catch the pregame because of the flight situation I had, but what was the deal? I did not know he's missing the game today.
Yeah, I gotta watch the presser, but nobody tweeted anything about that. I don't know if he was asked about. But Clark Lee did say a couple days ago that, at least from what I've heard, is that there was some guys that were sick, and I wonder if he was one of those. That's just speculation at this point. It could be something else. He wasn't uniform on the sideline, which begs some questions, but I wonder if that was only if we really need him, he's available type of thing, and they didn't have to play him. So I guess that was a win. But if you're getting Rendon Fontenette back next year, he is the most impactful guy in that defense, and the fact that they won without him today is something. I guess we'll get more clarity on that at some point, hopefully, but I haven't seen anything. If somebody's watched the presser who's in here, it actually just went up on our channel, I believe. Let us know. But at this current moment, I haven't seen it.
A couple more guys. Grayson Morgan never played a snap this year. I think Grayson would have either started for them if he'd been healthy this year, or he would have been a key backup that played a lot of snaps either at center or one of the guards probably. That's a guy today with Hansen out, might have had a bigger role. I mean, might have been starting anyway. So that's a piece that you would hope they have next year that they didn't this year. And those two corners, like when Colby Taylor, again, couldn't control his behavior, and they kind of had to go to Jalen Lackey, who had a tough day against Tennessee. And, again, I've said it a million times. Not a knock on Jalen Lackey, not here to criticize him. He wasn't ready to play this year at the level they needed him to play, but he had to. And he did do some things for them at times. You know, he gets that PI penalty late in the game that gives Tech pretty good field position. But, you know, you have the two corners, Jones and
Davis.
Oh, Davis. Like, those guys, if they've been available, like Vanderbilt thought they would be in the spring, just bad luck both places, an injury and an illness. Hopefully you get those guys. Like, one of those guys would have been stepping in and probably giving them a big boost where they needed it. So I think that's your other hope going into next year is you get some pieces, not only, like a Pavia and Stowers coming back, that we didn't think were going to be in the mix 6 weeks ago, and you get those guys. Then you add in some guys from the portal. A couple of them are a little bit better than maybe you think. They still have some holes in the roster. They still, in my opinion, need an explosive running back. They need to upgrade a receiver. They need better players on both lines of scrimmage. But I thought this game was just kind of a signature win, because it was Clark Lee getting about as much out of that roster as was humanly possible. All the breaks didn't go their way with personnel today. Having Fontenette out today was big, but they won it anyway, and that just kind of summarized their season.
Yeah, I think Clark Lee got the most out of this team that just about any coach could have got out of it, and real testament to him, real nod to Jerry Kill and Tim Beck as well. This whole staff did a tremendous job, and I don't know if their back was fully against the wall, but certainly felt like it was getting there, and this was a prove-it year for them. Chris, I know we got to get out of here, but they certainly proved it.
Yeah, they did. And I don't know how much life Billy's battery's got. He's hosting this, so I'm just going to end it on this and get us out of here. Thank you to those of you who are here tonight. We've got a couple of big announcements coming up in the next week about the site and the podcast. So just hang around for those. Justin was asking earlier, can you subscribe to the channel? I don't know that we've got that set up for super chats yet and all those things and paid memberships, but I think that's on the short list of things that we want to do next year. We've got some ideas. We got to finalize them, but I think you're going to see us a lot more in the coming year. Yeah, Justin, that's one of the things we're going to get fixed. And we got some things in the works at the website too. So this next week, is Vanderbilt ends its season on the biggest win other than Alabama game maybe in a decade. Some big things in store for us at Vandy Sports too. All right, Billy, I'm going to turn it over to you to end it here. Sorry we couldn't go longer, just couldn't be helped today. What's that?
Don't worry about it, Chris.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Well, anyway, for Joey Dwyer, I'm Chris Lee. This has been the Vandy Sports Postgame Show. Thanks for watching. God bless you. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. We'll see you again soon.